Welcome to day 2 of the 2021 Stride Product Showcase, a 3-day virtual event where we will feature some of the innovative tools and strategies to solve today's transportation challenges. I'm Lily Eleftheriadou. I'm the director of the University of Florida Transportation Institute and the director of the Stride Center. Before we begin today, I want to recognize, first of all, Ondine Wells, Inez Aviles-Spadoni, and Mitch Darigo for going above and beyond and doing a great job organizing this showcase. The Stride Center, as you see on your screen, is the 2016 US DOT Region 4 for the Southeast University Transportation Center, which is housed at the University of Florida Transportation Institute. The mission of Stride is to develop novel strategies for reducing congestion. So this showcase presents some of the products that we have developed so far. And our hope is that you will find these useful and a great resource for reducing congestion for your region. And today we'll hear presentations from researchers throughout the consortium shown here. Now, each day of the showcase focuses on a different theme. Those of you who joined us yesterday heard from our research and panelists about innovations related to transit and mobility. And today we will discuss new tools and strategies related to congestion mitigation. The registration link that you use today will also allow you access for tomorrow. If you want to look at the full agenda, please take a look at our event page, and the link is shown here on your screen. And Ondine will also provide it in the chat box. So now I'd like to introduce you to, excuse me, today's moderator, Michael Hunter, who will be guiding discussions around today's theme of advanced strategies and technologies for congestion mitigation. Mike Hunter is a professor at the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology, and he leads the Stride partnership at Georgia Tech. So Mike, over to you.
All right, thank you, Lily. And you know what? I'm going to take as a compliment if you think I'm a professional as well as a professor. I'll accept that. That's pretty good. So thank you for asking me to moderate this. This is fantastic. You know, I've been pretty fortunate through my time with Stride. I've gotten to know actually all 6 of the presenters. So I'm really looking forward to what they're going to say, and their work is very exciting. We also have 2 fantastic moderators, Joseph Hummer and Maria Roel, who are going to help us provide context on these works and on this effort about stakeholders and how this might be used and how the collaborations and where to go with it. So we're really looking forward to that assistance in taking this from academics to practice, which is a critical and important step. As y'all probably already know, right, we've got Joe Maria, and Joe is currently the state traffic management engineer with the North Carolina DOT, but he also spent most of his career as a professor at North Carolina State University and served as the chair of civil engineering at Wayne State. And Maria is a principal planner at the Atlanta Regional Commission, better known as ARC, for those who work in that area. And it does a lot of work in operations planning, transportation technology, transportation equity. And I also very proud to say Maria's a Georgia Tech graduate. I know I'm not supposed to brag about these sort of things, but hey, I'm going to take every success we've got, right? So Maria is fantastic. And then we're going to have our speakers, just a little bit of mechanics of how we're going to deal with this today. You can find the bios for all the speakers and the full bios for our panels in the booklet that was sent out. So that is available. You can see that. Each presenter, we're actually going to present a video. We're going to do about a 5-minute video. So sort of a preset set of slides with certain information we've asked them to present, and then we'll follow that with a 10-minute Q&A. And I ask the audience members, if you have a question, there's the Q&A box or the chat box, but Q&A would be preferable in Zoom. Please go ahead and enter your question there, and then I'll sort of ask that out to the panel. After we complete all 6 presentations and their 10 questions, then we're going to have a more open discussion where we really sort of talk about the context in general of our general topic areas and how we can take this to the field and to the practice. And really, again, a lot of this is about this idea of transitioning research to stakeholders? How do we really make that leap, that technology transfer to find use in these various pieces and this great research that's going on? We've got 2 hours allotted for today. We'll make it, we'll get it in. I think there's a lot of really good stuff. We could spend a day on it if we wanted to, but we'll keep a clock, right? That's my job as moderator. That's the one thing I got to get right, is to keep everybody on time. So without anything further ado, why don't we get started? There we go. So our first speaker is Naseem Uddin at University of Alabama at Birmingham, and he's going to talk about real-time vehicle location model.
Hello, this is Naseem Uddin. I'll talk about flyby traffic congestion management today. And this product that we'll talk about has these big pictures. The drone will be attached to the building or electric poles or any other hardware you have on the roadside. And as it looks down upon the street in intersection or a highway, it will extract, it will collect images, and then it using a statistical model that will describe relationship between the features and the congestion, it will estimate the congestion time. And it can easily monitor the volume, the queues, the speeds, occupancy, and density of the roadway traffic at the same time. So the challenge is, the reason we need this system currently, we don't have any system that can monitor or manage recurring traffic. For example, the peak hour traffic congestions or non-recurring traffic congestions, like something that caused by the football game or a traffic incident. And also, more importantly, during the flash flood or hurricane or wildfire, tornadoes, we have those traffic disruptions and the dangerous traffic behavior where you don't have infrastructure available to guide them through. So this system will come very handy. And here really we relate the traffic simulations of that particular segment of the road, and we extract the relationship between the features and the expected time of congestions. And then in the real time, we use those features like speed, distance between vehicles to predict the congestion. So our solution basically involved a flock of interconnected drones that establish together deployable systems and perform immediate monitoring and assessment of the traffic conditions, including if the congestion is about to be approached. And it used their own computational and communication capability of the drone themselves, and to really have an integrated platform to perform this monitoring and traffic analysis. And as it does it, we also have a sister system, a smartphone that we can drop on a highway, bridges and roadway bridges, and by looking into the vibrations, and then from the vibrations, they're looking into the frequency shift, we can also predict the safety of the bridges that being monitored by the drone for the traffic congestion. In order to have the full systems developed and implementable, we need research support that will help us to identify range and the limitations of the UAV that we can use for the traffic monitoring and congestion management. And we also need to develop full-scale system architectures and a number of proof of concept study to really predict the real-time congestions. And also we need some actual field demonstrations to gain the confidence. For implementation plan, we have several steps that we like to carry out this product. First is really we need to have some field calibrated traffic stream models to validate our detections and calibrate the traffic stream model that will be used traffic state assessment. We need a number of them. Then we need to show a proof of concept study in a signalized intersections in the real time. Then we like to expand that to a corridor-wide traffic management. Now, few risks are still there. For example, the security, when the BUV is interconnecting themselves. So we need to develop some security mechanisms so that their communications is not violated or interrupted. And also the appropriate wireless communication options because as UVs are moving along the roadway, it's very critical that we have reliable and consistent wireless communications. So that needs to be optimized and perfected. Impact is significant that we see through this project, a cost-effective solution to monitor and manage traffic disruptions in hurricane, flood, or tornadoes, to detect traffic disruption in crash or in freeway, road maintenance and paving operations, to detect crashes, disabled vehicle and debris in the road, and to notify the control and detecting the bike and pedestrians, minimize the highway work zone incident, traffic flow impact, many, many others. And if you need to more, please contact Nasimuddin. I'm here, and thank you very much.
Fantastic. All right, so as we get started, again, if any of the audience members have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A. And then also, Maria and Joe, if you have any questions, please go ahead and just jump right in as you're pondering these a little bit. I do have one I'd like to ask, and maybe I'm going to jump in and get technical too quickly, and I apologize for that if I do. But I was thinking a little bit, I think something I really kind of like about the idea was that you sort of show the drones kind of attaching to poles or attaching to buildings. And my assumption is this is how you're getting over the battery problem. That with a lot of these drones, you can get 15 minutes of video, or if you're doing well and with bigger battery, maybe a bigger battery, maybe an hour. So there's a real battery electric life problem. And by sort of taking that piece away, now you just need to kind of keep that video running. So that really helps. So if I'm a stakeholder and I'm trying to work with these, what do I need to be thinking about in terms of staffing or to kind of run these and have them fly out to the poles? Do you think this is ultimately going to require a stakeholder? Would I have dedicated staff, or this is sort of their job, or is it implemented? Your operations folks will just have various people who are able to do it. Have you kind of thought about how a stakeholder might physically go through the implementation process?
Right, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity really to talk to all of you. And thank you, Mike, and for asking this. It's very important questions. Yes, I think at the end of the day, it's all comes down to the learning curve. I think in the beginning, I see to be careful, we have a dedicated group of people, making sure, they feel comfortable with the technology. I think once over the time, the learning curve is there, people are feeling confident. So over the long run, I would say, I think the manpower will be the least concern, because this is an automatic process. Even, you can place them in a certain location, even drone can do their job without even human intervention or human involvement. It can, even today's technology, it will be possible. So it's really having the confidence and the security system in place. That is the issue. It's not the technology. So what I'm saying is, you can imagine you just place some drone in different locations along the highway, right? And you can time them up, or as you said, because it's going to be attached to the pole and a hardwire, you don't need the power. Actually, we also designed some charging pad that you can put the charging pad, and it's going to be hooked up with the solar panel or even electric line. And the drone can sit on that and charge themselves. So even along the street, when they're sitting there, they will charge themselves, right? And also they can attach. So the power is completely out of the issue now. So the power is not a problem. We'll have through charging pad, attaching, can maintain their action throughout the 24/7. That can be also be done. So the power is not issue at all. You can imagine 24/7 drones are sitting there and monitoring them. Okay, so and then they collect the data and you can put them on the cloud, and without people going in the site, they can still have access to the data. So to answer to your question, human factors can be eliminated over the long run if we can gain confidence on the system and we learn over the time. Does it answer your question, Mike?
Sure. No, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, that's going down the path I was thinking about. Maria or Joe, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
Yeah, I have a question. I know in Georgia, and probably also in Florida, I'm not sure about Alabama, but we have a ton of CCTV cameras along all of our highways, freeways, already. And a lot of our local governments also have a lot of cameras, even on their arterial major streets. So I'm wondering what advantages this system would have to the infrastructure that is already kind of bought and paid for, and maybe just what your thoughts are on that.
So yes, so I think there are two things here. One is to have those kind of system in every intersection, in every segment of the highway is impossible. It's not realistic. And so you can imagine a set of drone, right? I mean, installed in every few miles, take care of the whole segment. So it's really practicability. I think having this system in place, you can cover entire network. Whether the system you mentioned is very expensive, time consuming, and you can only afford only few sections that you are very concerned about, right? So during the flash flood, hurricane, you don't know what section, what segment of the road will be in trouble, right? But having the drone in the system flying every now and then, you can cover the entire zone, entire region. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thanks.
And Naseem, I have a question kind of similar. Don't we have to have some type of intelligence or some type of knowledge beforehand to know where to send the drones? Wouldn't that require in turn sort of a bigger or network-wide surveillance system of some sort?
So my vision, my vision is that you cover, instead of focusing on certain segment that you're concerned about. That's what I think the Maria was talking about, that she has some segment of the road has been, right, the camera there and they're monitoring them, so that's good, I think. But the thing is, you cannot afford for everywhere in the highway, right? But this system actually will leverage that. But I get your point. I mean, in order to establish, let's say, the congestion time management or something, you need to have those study done in that particular segment, right? You need to have some information about how, this system is, happening through simulations. And then you using that information to help drone to figure out the congestion time. That's for the congestion management. You need to have some simulation done for each of the sections. But for other issue, like after the disaster, when the hurricane happened, the flash flood is happening, or some, the traffic jam happening. So even those time, a flock of drone flying across the segment of the highway, it still can do that part of job. So there is a many dimension to it other than congestion. For congestion management, you're right. You need to have the simulation results for each of the segment.
So let me jump in with a couple. We have a couple questions from the audience. The first one is, for the use of the drones, are there any approvals or any other issues with FAA?
Yeah, I think, but the good news is, I think as the time goes, I think people are, some DOTs are getting permissions, approval for some things. Right now, there are some, you're absolutely correct. There is some regulation issues, but based on what we hear and the way things are moving, those restrictions gonna be over the time will be gone once we have more comfortable, we are more confidence in the system. So we are looking into the future, of course. I mean, right now, there are some regulatory issues. Yes.
Okay. And the other question is, so you have a lot of auto trucks in the current videos. Is there thoughts on, or is the system currently capable to identify pedestrian bikes? Is that also a mode you're looking at? Yeah, that's possible. Okay. And another question related to what I think the Joe and Maria may have been getting to a little bit too, is the drones themselves. Do you always see those being part of a DOT property, a agency property, or is this something that maybe a vendor would be the actual supplier? So the DOT doesn't own the drones. The vendor just says there's an event, right? Special event, maybe the Super Bowl or whatever's going on, and they have a vendor, and it's the vendor actually who's doing all the deployments and setting the video. Is there Does it matter? Does the implementation scheme, do you have any thoughts about that?
I don't think it's matter. I think it's like what LDOT can have their own staff and own their own drones, or they can have some vendors to take care of them. It can go either way. As far as the legality is covered, right? I mean, the legal issue has been worked out. I don't think who does it is the matter, actually.
Okay. We only have about a minute left for questions on this one. Did Maria or Joe, do you feel no obligation? Was there anything you wanted to jump in before we go to the next video?
Go ahead, Joe.
Just real quick, the cell phone picking up vibrations on bridges, that looked like it was kind of a, oh, by the way, we also did this product too. I think you should probably spin that off and pursue that hard with structures people. It's not really a traffic thing, but you know, take it to the structures or the bridge maintenance group.
Yeah, I think the reason I throw it out because I mentioned about the disaster risk management a little bit, and I thought it's going to be handy because when you're evacuating the people, you may want to know if this bridge is safe to get the traffic moving. So there are some related relation there, but I agree with you. It's not directly related. Yes.
All right. So I do think for sake of time, I want to make sure all the presentations get theirs. Just there was one comment, you don't need to respond to this, but it was mentioned that ALDOT does have an office for drone application to collect data for design, construction, and maintenance, but not for congestion management. So the respondent was wondering if, you know, if you've reached out to them to sort of talk about this different application, just sort of something to put out there.
Sure.
So why don't we move on to the next one, Andi? So the next one is going to be weaving segment operations, data new methodology by Nagy Raphael. And all right.
Hello, this is Nagy Raphael, and I'm going to be spending the next few minutes talk about weaving segment operation data and new methodology in this product showcase. The big picture here is that we wanted to develop an updated, simple, and more accurate method for weaving segment operation to be used in the highway capacity manual. You see the screen here, we have some observation of speed observation on weaving segment and predicted observation of speed in the HCM. And generally speaking, we find that these observations tend to underestimate the speed significantly. The challenge here in order to develop any weaving method, as you see here, is to capture accurate data on lane changing and extracting those data in order to calculate also the amount of weaving and non-weaving traffic within the weaving segment. The solution, we started with a extraction of trajectories, and you can see the trajectory were extracted by a third-party organization. However, all we get is the idea of the vehicle trajectory. We cannot measure the number of lane changes, where those lane changes are happening, and essentially how much weaving and non-weaving traffic is occurring. The solution was for us to internally develop on those video systems some gates. And we have two types of gate that we have developed, what we call crossing gates and longitudinal gates. The crossing gates allow us to measure the volumes as well as understanding where every vehicle has entered in which lane. The gates across the lane marks will tell us when anytime a gate is crossed from a vehicle, and those gates are numbered, so it allows us to actually denote any lane changes from any of those 4 or 5 lanes to any other lane. This has enabled us to collect sufficient data to be able to develop what I would call simple field validated method to predict speed and capacity for weaving segment. The entire method really relies on 2 equations, one equation to calculate speed and one equation to calculate capacity. And once we know the speed, capacity, then we can estimate very quickly the level of service. The impact is that this concept that actually began with the STRIDE project has now been adopted in national research under NCHRP 726. That project is underway, is expected to be completed within the next 3 to 4 months. And the intent is to replace the method with what we're showing you on the right is a computational engine, if you will, input those cells in the green and the results here. If you're more interested in this, please send me an email at raphael@ncsu.edu at the indicated cell number.
All right. Thank you, Nagi. I'm going to try this without my video for a minute. I apologize for that. My connection is jumping a lot, so maybe I can save some bandwidth by not turning my video on. So as Maria and Joe start thinking a little bit about what you just presented, I'm sort of curious, Nagi. I know primary stakeholder in this is sort of you have the HCM. So that's just sort of the general reworking the HCM, which is a lot of stakeholders. But I'm curious, do you see any other stakeholders who maybe beyond the HCM implementation that we might want to be reaching out or maybe would be targeted or interested in this type of work?
Well, I think, well, obviously you're right. The user of the HCM are going to be the first one. The other things should be, especially on the data end, should be the developer of microsimulation models. There is a lot of work that seems people are using, particularly when it gets to interchange design and interchange operations. They're using microsimulation, whether it's vSim or other models. The fact that we now have very good data that will enable them to validate, verify the accuracy of the simulation model, I think that would be a very useful tool for them as well.
So that's really fascinating. So you've kind of split then your products into multiple things. You have the equations that you're developing, but the data itself becomes a very useful potential product for stakeholders to be using.
Absolutely. Questions like how long do we need a weaving segment where people are merging and diverging within the weave? Do we need very long one if all the action is happening at both ends, for example? So the data could help a lot in those kind of things as well.
All right, and Joe, I see you got your virtual hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Nagy, you know I really love this research, and I think this is more of a comment than a question. I think you really hit on almost a textbook case of what's implementable, at least at NCDOT, because there's only 2 people in our department that make a decision on what weaving methodology we're going to use. So you just need to convince them that this one's better. And that's not hard to do because the current method is so awful. And we implement, and that's that. So, you know, the question Lily asked earlier, what's implementable? Part of the answer is a very nice, narrow topic that, you know, where it really only comes down to 1 or 2 people at the agency that need to make a decision, and, you know, boom, we're on our way.
Thank you.
Maria?
I think also in that regard, I know everyone at ARC loves good calculator. If you have something that's really easy to use and the inputs are something that we have or can obtain in a way that isn't so obtrusive to us, we are always down to play with some new models and calculators that are a bit just plug and play. That being said, we have been burned sometimes relying on calculators that have not been updated or kept current with some different, you know, not weaving specifically, but in general using these kind of calculators. So I think having the sustainability part where you all don't just decide that this isn't a project you're interested in anymore and then it's kind of dead to everyone is something that we look for.
Excellent comment. Thank you, Maria. I think part of this, the fact that this method, not necessarily the same exact equation, but the method that you just saw, which is based on the 2 equations, is now part of what NCHRP is going to do. That gives it a lot more national visibility and legitimacy, if you will. The other thing I just want to let folks know, we're not done yet. The work that was done initially was focused on what we call ramp weaves, the very simple weaves with one auxiliary lane, etc. Both Lily and I are working on extending the method to complex weaves. So where we have system interchange with multiple weaving and multiple lanes, we're actually, again, adopting the same methods with the same approach, but now we're going to be incorporating the configuration of the weave. So right now we're dealing with one configuration that will be a lot. Now, as far as going back to your question, I think that's more applied to any one of the tools that we're going to use. So I think maybe this is more a question for Lily or for folks who are running those UTCs. How do we make those tools, continue to update them to make sure there is technical support down the line? So I'll hand that question to Lily.
So let me ask a question here. You know, the question, well, Lily, we need more money, right? But let me ask a question. And I kind of want to build actually on what Joe and Maria just said. And actually, Joe and Maria, you may be the ones to answer this. But so Nagi, one issue Joe mentioned is, you know, there's two people you got to get to make the decision, and that's kind of the implementation. But in the end, your target is really the highway capacity manual, right? So you got to get this in the manual, and then once it's in the manual, Joe's two folks can use it.
Yes.
But that does sort of create an interesting barrier for those who are doing this kind of work. If I can't get it into that manual, how do I get a stakeholder to use it? Because it runs a lot of risk of basically withering on the vine of doing that type of work if it doesn't end up in that manual, or you know, maybe in some micro simulation model. And I wonder where, you know, when we talk about our research and our output and our integration, what is sort of the middle ground for folks who are maybe doing this kind of work? I mean, Joe, is there a way, if it isn't blessed in a manual or something like that, for it to get in front of those people, or are you kind of stuck on the path?
No, you can get it there, but it's got to be a case like this one where the manual is known to be so flawed that we need an alternative. If the manual is covering an area decently, in most people's opinion, then yeah, we're going to have a hard pull to get a substitute in place. But you know, this particular case, what's in the manual right now is pretty, you know, universally panned, and everybody's out there looking for a substitute. And there may be other cases like that too, where the manual either, you know, the method is flawed, or somehow there's a hole there, or something the manual doesn't cover. And in which case, then it's up to our staff to go out there and sort of find the next best thing, and we do that, and you know, we don't have any problem doing that. But you know, if it's something decent in the manual, we'll always choose that first.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right that the highway capacity manual is the path to go for implementation. And I would say working with them along the way, as we have, and making presentations at the subcommittees, maximizes the chance that the methodology will eventually be adopted. And it sounds like there is, like Joe was saying, and Nagi earlier, there is definitely a need for this type of a methodology. And so, and there's nothing out there right now. There's nobody else doing any similar work. The other one that I want to highlight, which UTCs are doing, and it's a requirement for our grant, is to have open source for our data. So all the data that we're putting together for this project are available to anybody who wants to come later and add to it, or you know, if they collect additional data, they can recalibrate, they can investigate. I think that is a major contribution of the project to the Highway Capacity Committee, and I'm hoping that they can see that as a way forward, where all the methodologies, when they're developed, their databases should be available for others who want to check, who want to recalibrate. You know, when additional information comes in, they can use that as the basis.
And just to follow up on Lily, we had spoken to Bastian Schroeder, who's the PI on the NCHRP, and he's also agreed that his database will try to also incorporate it within the Zenoda database that Lily is developing as well. So I think, yeah, I think the title of my presentation, I view data as important as the methodology itself, because I think its life is a lot longer than a specific method or a specific approach.
Maria, I think you were about to jump in there.
Oh, I was just going to say, as an alternative, like if it seems like an uphill battle to get something into the manual, I think just thinking about things from a national perspective and making sure that while you're doing your research, obviously in a specific area and using that data, understanding that you're going to need to extrapolate to different places and kind of put in the groundwork to make that easy for all of those places. And that's how you can get it a little bit more. The more places are using it, the more other places are going to hear about it. So I think in your case, you're already good, but in general, I think that's a good thing to remember.
So I know we're running long on this conversation, and I apologize whenever you throw highway capacity management into anything, you're going to get long-winded. That's just sort of the nature of the beast. And you should be, you know, the audience should know half the people talking on this were or are part of this committee. So there's a lot of inside baseball going on. I think this is a great topic for after. I'd like to circle back to the idea of stakeholder engagement is not always necessarily directly through the stakeholder. It may be there's an additional path, like a manual or something one has to go through. And I think that's a good thing for us to talk more about how researchers can understand really the path a stakeholder must go through to use something. You can't just use it, right? There needs to be often some additional approval by, you know, a national panel or something along those lines. But I think for now, let us jump to the next presentation. All right, our next one is a simulation extension with CAV functionality for VISIM by Prithvi Manjuatha, which I probably mispronounced. I deeply apologize, considering I'm on this project and work with Prithvi. All yours.
Hello, everyone. This is Prithvi Manjuatha. The product that I'm going to present today is a simulation extension with CAV functionality for VISIM. This product was developed on a Strike project along with my co-principal investigators, Dr. Lily Lefteradou from University of Florida and Dr. Michael Hunter from Georgia Tech. So the big picture for this product is that there's significant improvements in autonomous vehicle technology as well as their connectivity and interaction with the future generation traffic system. So this is expected to create a perfect storm in how vehicles navigate through cities, roads, and highways. So this, brings us a challenge of, of answering many what-if scenarios to be considered. Specifically for this project, we considered how CAVs impact traffic management and emissions. So our solution to this challenge was to come up with a microscopic simulation extension for VISIM, VISIM being the most used commercial, widely accepted simulator, to develop an extension that evaluates traffic operational quality as well as emissions in the presence of CAVs. So to implement this solution, so we use two key components of VISIM. Those are COM application programming interface and external driver model. So COM application programming interface is very useful, in extracting all sorts of data from the simulation environment, be it traffic data or the signal status, etc. So we use a COM API to get that data, and COM API interacts with AV or CV logic to demonstrate how the product works. Like we used a couple of AB and CV models from the literature. So the COM API pushes all the input data into the logic, and it takes the estimated accelerations and puts it on a text file. And the external driver model's strength is implementing the acceleration for each vehicle accurately in VISIM. So the EDM picks up these estimated accelerations from the text file left by COM API and implements it in VISIM. So this is a simulation implementation. So this was coupled with an emissions implementation where the trajectories were extracted in a 1 Hertz frequency, and they were ran through the MOVES model to come up with various greenhouse gases. On the right, you can see some of the example graphs or plots of how the speed can change for different penetration rates and for different saturation rates. And you can also see some box plot down here for the emissions. So overall, we expect the impact of this simulation extension to be once it gets adopted widely by the CAV researchers and the simulation modeling community, this would enable wide-scale assessment of how CAVs can impact traffic and congestion and emissions. And also, as a future work, we are doing it on another Strike project currently, is that when you couple this kind of a framework with an optimization setup, we expect, and if the one of the optimization criteria are to limit or reduce emissions, we expect impact of such a implementation to also, reduce the impact of emissions on climate change, for example. With that, I'll leave you with the contact information for myself, and feel free to reach out to me to get the product and give it a test ride.
All right, thank you. I'm going to keep my video hidden for a second. You can feel free to put yours up, but it seems to be helping my connection a little bit. So again, as Joe and Maria sort of think a little bit about, as again, the audience members, please remember, go ahead and put some questions into the Q&A, and we'll get those out. But sort of as a start, Prithvi, I want to ask a slightly different question, which I'll apologize in advance, right? If I'm being difficult. By the way, I'd like to mention, great project. I love that environmental piece, the admissions piece in there. That's some really good work right there, right? Make me the moderator. I'm going to compliment myself, right? So my question is, what are the real challenges, I think, with some of these microscopic simulation models and some of these other pieces, particularly when we're looking at the public sector side, is maintaining the skill levels inside the agencies to actually implement some of what we're talking about, right? Because people sort of get promoted up through the ranks, and maybe they get really good at VISIM, but then they move on, right? They go up. So that skill set to implement some of the type of work that we may be thinking about. Have you thought at all about how might we be able to assist stakeholders in being able to implement some of these tools that aren't quite as plug and play?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Hunter. So I know we're all playing sort of catch up, in terms of, these technologies are coming and, they're, causing an impact on our traffic. So how to enable, people on the public side to use these tools. So as part of our current Stride project that we are doing as a continuation to this, I think there is an education and training component that we are working on. So not only just educate on the academic side, I think, if we can make these tools, first of all, design these tools or versions of these tools in a way that it's easy for someone to, with preliminary VISIM knowledge to pick it up and use it straight away. And secondly, parallelly coming up with training materials to help them. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that's great. I don't know if there is an answer to that question. I think it's a very difficult question that we're all struggling with. I think the agencies are struggling with it. Is as these tools get more and more advanced. It's difficult because there's not necessarily a career path for somebody. That's what they do is, the way there is design, people who design their whole career. You tend not to have that same path on some of these analysis that people tend to promote.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was wondering, one way to do that is also to, keep our ears open and, have a communication line with the folks who are potentially going to use this, and, try to take their help, as to how they see it from their perspective, while we design versions of these tools.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, Mike and Prithvi, that's also what consultants are for.
Mhm.
So, we're lucky enough in our agency to have a couple of people who are pretty expert at microsimulation. We use Transmodeler, by the way, not vSim, but someday they might move on, as Mike's saying, but we at least hope that there's a base of expertise out in our consultants that we can use when we need to. My observation is, I appreciate what you're doing here, but at our agency anyway, we feel like we know almost nothing about CAV demand. The capacity side, we feel much more confident in. Your work and the work that Bastian Schroeder did with the pooled fund study that's coming into the HCM and some other people out there. We really don't have too many questions about the capacity these days. We have no earthly idea what the demand is going to be, CAVs out in our design year. And that's what's holding us up from really being able to implement. It's not the capacity side, it's the demand side.
Yeah, I mean, that's a $1 billion question, right? So like everybody wants to know, like, when exactly different, stages of, CAV penetration is going to happen. So I think it's a more of an industry-wide, broad question. Dr. Hunter or Dr. Lilly, do you want to chime in?
Well, I'll say that there are some estimates out there. We were working on another project and we saw an estimate that, for example, Todd Littman has, and he has a graph and by year and all that. But there is that information, but how accurate is it? How is it going to pan out? It depends on so many different things that it's just, but you got to go on something, right? And so you go with some of the estimates. In our case, we thought that graph was legitimate based on the information that we have. And so you go with what you know, but who knows what's going to happen in 5-10 years.
I guess what I would add to that is, who knows? I agree with absolutely what Lily's saying, that you really don't know. There's just so much unknown, and a lot of the unknown on the demand side is the use case. So since we don't exactly know how this is going to be used, it may create a bunch of new uses we don't know. I think the piece I would add is I probably don't have nearly the confidence that, Joe, that you're expressing on the capacity side. I worry greatly that a lot of capacity assumptions, and this is our own work too that we're talking about, fundamentally at some point you got to make an assumption about how you think these things are going to work, about how you think they're going to platoon, about what you think their headways are going to look like, and those assumptions that it's not the ability to build a traffic flow model. It's the ability. I have great confidence that we can all build traffic flow models, but I don't have great confidence in is that we're making the right assumptions in those models. And changing those assumptions can drastically change the output. And until we really see what happens, we don't know. And I'll take it even a step further. And that's, you look at the grief that Tesla was recently getting about pushing an update out and then having to pull it right back, because they're having some issues. And so you could imagine, right, we might have a system that works one day and one of the main auto companies pushes an update out that suddenly changes the way the flow works of the cars. And that's sort of the model they have right now. They can just push this stuff out. And all of a sudden, ramps are working one day, aren't working the next day, simply because of an update, an over-the-air update from your auto manufacturer. So I actually don't have the confidence in that side either, which, I guess is great for researchers, but boy, that's hard for stakeholders, right? And I acknowledge that. So we've had, let's see, Maria, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I think that I completely agree with everything that's being said. I think from our perspective, CAV is still kind of a scenario planning stage. I could see our VISM user definitely wanting to play with this and kind of our research capacity themselves. But in terms of actually getting it into how we run our air quality models. We also use moves. We probably wouldn't have the information to actually do that yet. But I think that this is going to be really important in the future. In terms of using the platform of Vism, I think that's pretty smart. I'm guessing you looked at how many people are using it and chose it based off of that. You run the risk of something else coming along and switching it out. But I think that's just always going to happen. So I think overall it's great. It's just a little early, but you got to do it early sometimes.
Thank you.
So there are two audience questions. One is, one's my fault because I went and complimented myself. So then I got a question on it. How do you calculate the admissions directly from PTV Vism, or did you implement formulations from the COM interface? So it is not the PTV admissions. So out of Prithvi's model, he would output the trajectories. So we have a 10th of a second resolution trajectory. And then we applied the moves model. So these admissions are based on the moves model, and there are issues there. I'm not going to pretend, we know the bidding and, where you're using Wiedemann 74 or even 99, all those great things. But it is based on translation into moves. Specific to the Bosch emissions model, I guess I'm just going to remain agnostic to that at the moment because I haven't done any direct comparisons. So since I don't really know enough about that one, I don't want to comment on it, because that'd be a mistake to do such a thing. And then there was a question, so do you think PTV will buy this product? Prithvi, you should answer that, but I'm going to jump on it. I apologize, and maybe Lily will fix what I'm about to say. And I think this is one of the very nice things about the UTCs and about Stride is nobody's going to buy anything, right? It's free. It's free to them for use. As Lily mentioned earlier, all the data is given away. We publish everything we do. So if PTV or Samsung or Subo or any of these folks want to use anything that's developed for these projects, go for it, right? We consider that a success and an outreach to stakeholders. It's not a product development to that side where, to my knowledge, we're actually trying to, patent the IP. We really just want people to use it. And Lily, I don't know if you want to run that down a little further.
Yeah, it's true. I will say that as part of the UTC program, there is the opportunity to develop IP and share that. So you can definitely create a licensing environment for whatever it is we are creating, for sure.
Yeah, we also have Marilo from PTV. Messages in the chat. She's a gator as well. So thanks, Marilo, for the comment. So yeah, we did present our product with the PTV user group, and there is an interest in this product. Yeah, I think both Dr. Lilly and Dr. Hunter summarized it pretty well.
All right, so we are running long, and I know we will talk about all this more, but let us jump to the next presenter. So our next is Google Location History Survey Tool, presented by Angshman Gwynn.
Hello, I am Angshman Gwynn from Georgia Tech, and I will introduce to you a survey tool that we have developed at Georgia Tech as part of one of our Stride projects. With smartphones, social networks, Internet of Things, connected and automated vehicles, and all these advancements in edge computing, data about anything and everything is becoming quite ubiquitous. But availability of such data is not necessarily automatic. A large part of the data collection is being driven by large corporations. Such data is not available readily for use by researchers and practitioners. In transportation research, one such data set we are interested in is the vehicle trajectory data, which has historically been very hard to obtain, even after these recent advancements. There are several commercial data providers who provide aggregated travel time data and origin destination estimates in archival as well as real-time format, but not in individual vehicle trace format, due to obvious privacy reasons and also because of the bulk of such data sets. The navigational app provider does collect the data and use it themselves, but does not give it out. This collection of such data for us is feasible with deployment of in-vehicle equipment with voluntary participants. But collection of such data is extremely resource and budget intensive. It also needs prior planning. That is, you cannot get the data after the fact, after some event, construction, etc. But you have to have it already started before the event or change occurred. Now, archived historic tracking data are available to individuals through their Google location history. The caveat is that the person needs to be an Android phone user and the person needs to have Google location history enabled. With about 70% of the market share being dominated by Android phones, this should not be an issue. However, we do need to account for any such bias occurring during the analysis. This tool provides the necessary code base to deploy a web-based interface for collecting Google location history data from participants. It provides an interface that obtains informed consent from the participants. It provides an easy way for the participants to obtain the necessary data from their Google accounts. It restricts to the period required by the survey, and it provides a way to securely upload the data to the survey database. The use of this tool still requires participation from the volunteers. Like any other study that involves collection of vehicle trace data from a large road user base over an extended period of time. The data survey tool does not solve that problem for you. However, it significantly reduces the resources required for deployment. And since the data obtained is from the past, there is no post-equipment deployment wait time for obtaining the data. Just to circle back, what do you do with this tool? Well, this tool does not directly plug into a system to solve a problem in real time, but rather it provides us a way to simplify the process of getting data that can be used in different kinds of studies, such as a network level analysis, panel planning study, corridor level operations analysis studies, before and after studies, and so on. The other advantage is that in this method of data collection, you are not limited to a geographic area for the data collection. Depending on the kind of incentive and the recruitment effort you put in, you can get data at a regional scale. So the code for deploying this data has been made available on GitHub. You are free to get it from there and use it for your studies. If you have any questions, you can reach me at ungshuman.gwen@ce.giatech.edu. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Fantastic. So, Angshuman, looking at your presentation, I'm sort of curious when you think about stakeholders and potential use cases. I can see a lot of use cases. Data, and I think that captures one of the big themes we have is data in what we're seeing. But I'm curious, you did mention that problem of getting people to agree. So do you have any thoughts about how stakeholders might, let's say they want to apply this tool and use this to get the data? Do you have any thoughts or insights on maybe successful paths towards getting people's willingness to participate in such a study?
Yeah, but so getting people to participate is always a problem, especially with these kind of data sets where you have these massive privacy concerns. It means because the person's track history is being exposed. Well, not really exposed. We have all these kinds of IRB protocols in place to safeguard that exposure, but still, means to somebody's mind who is not familiar with the kind of security protocols we are throwing in there, means it would definitely seem like they're giving away their information about their life. The good thing or the saving grace here is that we are doing this as a, getting the data after the fact. So people might be a little more relaxed about what they're giving away. They have an idea of what they're giving away. So we hope to have better luck here. Although during the data collection, we did not, our problem was more due to a bias on the kind of phone users we were capturing during the survey. Means we had an overwhelming number of iPhone users, even though the numbers say otherwise regarding the penetration of the Android and iPhone. So, but yeah, I know I'm not quite answering your question directly, because I don't have a solution on how to capture more respondents, but except that we can only allay their concerns regarding the privacy, and we cast a bigger net.
All right, Maria, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, so coming from an MPO perspective, this might differ from a state DOT, but we are just now starting to get our hands around the legalities around data. So if we were to have to own or maintain any of this kind of PII data, I think our lawyers would have an absolute conniption, because that puts a lot of risk on the agency. So that might just be a education issue, or something that's going to eventually turn over, where we'll have lawyers who are more apt to understand the risks involved. But from like a conservative government agency, that would probably be a red flag, I think, for us. So it's better if you all own it and we just get to use it sometime.
I guess once we could have external custodians like the universities, but we do have exactly for this purpose. That's why the IRB exists, right? Because to safeguard the interests of the participants in any kind of this kind of research efforts. So
I will say that even in the project that we are currently working on, Gwen, I know our legal team was like, IRB, we don't know what that is. We don't want to deal with anything dealing with that. That's a whole different thing we don't deal with. So that's where I think the education part will come in, of like getting people familiar with those safeguards and more willing to participate in that.
For audience members who are not familiar with the terms being thrown around, IRB is Institute Review Board. And essentially it's a process that within universities we must go through whenever we're dealing with any sort of privacy data, medical data. There's a number of categories, but essentially it creates a shield around those data sets. I mean, there's obviously a lot in there, but it's a way that data can be collected and protected. So, you know, again, there's always clauses in this, but you know, a Freedom of Information Act can't necessarily, we turn it around, we anonymize it, and that's all that can be done. So it's really intended to protect the participant. So there is that path, and that may be a way for stakeholders to like work with potential universities or others who can have that sort of protection of the data sets. Please know, though, that does also introduce a lot of delays, because now you've got a whole other round of approvals of lawyers and all kinds of things that's going through. But it's interesting to do it. Joe, you've got your hand up.
I do. Yep. It's interesting concept here. It kind of raises the tension. You know, good implementable research saves us money. The more directly, the better. And if I'm hearing it right, maybe by using these data directly, we save money that we'd otherwise have to pay to HERE or Streetlight or some other private vendor. And we're all about that. That's a fast track to getting your research implemented, is to directly save us money. But on the other hand, I agree with Maria that HERE and Streetlight and those vendors also provide that kind of service to us. Of they do some processing and they keep us at arm's length. Now we're just a customer. We just buy their product. And if they have a problem somehow with privacy, it's their problem, not ours. So there's a tension there for sure. But if you can save us money, we're all for that.
So I would come at it with a slightly different approach. Means the saving money is good, but this is not necessarily about the money. Means I would buy my way out of a problem if I can. So I'd be happy to pay here or Streetlight to give us the data if they are willing to, or if they can. But the thing that we were struggling to get during our project was the full path data. So means Streetlight and here they anonymize the data. They provide individual links. So we get information on a roadway link, but we do not get information about the kind of route choices that people are making and things at the entire route level. So that's the gap we were trying to fill with this. Maybe if there is enough demand and if we vocalize our demand, when Streetlight and here will come in and provide us that data and make it available for purchase as well. But again, means they do have the same kind of privacy concerns and issues, right? Means unless when we are looking at a route level data, I don't think we can get away completely from this challenge of being able to trace back, look at the data and trace back the trip of the person and figure out where that person was, who that person was, based on their repeated trips and such. So that's going to be a challenge for data for purchase.
Maria?
Yeah, I definitely hear that. I think this would be more of a money saver in terms of household travel surveys, where we would maybe, because we spend a ton of money on household travel surveys. And this gives you kind of the holy grail OD data that we are always looking for. It's just that I think we need to wrap our heads around, in general, the data piece of it.
So I know we're running along again. This has been great conversation. I'm just one really. There was one quick audience question, Gwen. I think you could probably answer just a couple words. Is you had a Venn diagram showing Apple, Google, and Waze data with R2. Was that derived from this study, or is that just sort of a notional graph, or what's that?
No, I should have a citation to the diagram on the slide.
Sure. If you could just throw that notation in the chat, that would be fantastic. If you get a chance, or if you don't, we'll follow up after. And also somebody asked for the link to the GitHub link to Dr. Gwen's code, and that has now been posted in the chat. So if anybody wants the link to that, that is also available. So we're going to keep going though, because I know I'm not controlling time as well as I should. All right. So the next one is performance measurement and management using CAV data. Dr. Hani.
This presentation is based on a project that we conducted as part of the STRIDE UTC to investigate the use of CV data for different applications in transportation engineering and planning. And the project was a collaborative effort between Florida International University, University of Alabama, Birmingham, with Dr. Virginia Cisiopico, and the University of Florida with Dr. Siva Srinivasan. The big picture is for us is to develop a framework that show how connected vehicle data and in general also automated vehicle data can be used to estimate the performance of the system in terms of travel time reliability, congestion measurement, and level of service, environmental impact, and so on, but also to derive a new performance measure that can be used to assess system performance. And the challenge is we have a lot of promise that the data that will come from connected vehicle can be used for traffic management. However, there is a lot to be known about the ability of this data to allow the estimation of performance measures, either those that are currently being measured by existing sensor technologies or third-party vendors, or through the use of, or through the development of new performance measures that are currently not being used for transportation system planning, design, and management. And in that aspect, then, we investigated the use of basic safety messages that comes from connected vehicle to estimate various measures. So in addition to the traditional measures like travel time and travel time reliability and environmental impacts, we also investigated the use of standard deviation between vehicles, standard deviation of individual vehicles, the time to collision, number of oscillation, acceleration, deceleration, thresholds, and so on, as measures of performance of the system. And we have obtained those measures on a smaller segment compared to what can be measured with existing technologies. So we subdivided the freeway into 300 feet segment per lane to estimate these measures for, and that allows us to identify the location of the congestion or the location of the safety issues, and also to predict those problems using machine learning in real-time operation. So there is a need then to update the central software of Traffic Management Center to allow it to receive and use these type of new measures and process those data, do the calculation either in the center or in the field at the edge, to or both to estimate those new performance measures, considering the amount of data that will be available. So we need an effective and efficient way to process this data and use it in real-time operation, and also to archive it for future use in design and planning. We think that these measures will allow agencies in the near future, not too far future, to better estimation and prediction of system performance. And it can be used as part of both offline planning and design and of the highway, or even of transportation management plans, but also in real-time processes, including, for example, the activation of the plans or even derivation of the plans in real-time operation, so that the system will operate in a better performance in terms of mobility and safety. We expect that this can impact the operation and management of the traffic and improve them both, as I mentioned, mobility, safety, and environmental impacts. So, for example, if the ramp metering or dynamic speed limit can be activated, and the parameters of these management strategies set based on a prediction of safety and mobility in the next 10-15 minutes, then we expect that these proactive strategies will be able to reduce the congestion and improve the different performance measures that we are trying to impact by implementing the strategies. this is my presentation today. If you have any question, please let us know, and want to thank Stride for funding this interesting project, and my team, my colleagues in the team, Dr. Virginia and Dr. Siba. Thanks a lot.
All right. Mohammed, thank you for the video. That was fantastic. And I know you're jumping on, and as Maria and Joe sort of get their thoughts together a little bit, I would like to ask one question, and this question actually may also be for Joe and Maria at the same time. And that is, your project, I think, really kind of highlights this, but I think we saw this in a couple of the others too, that when we think about as researchers working with stakeholders, I tend to think a lot about, the folks I generally interact with at my DOT, the folks in operations or in design, construction. But I think, Mohammed, what your project is really highlighting is there's also a major interaction with IT. So when you're working and to really utilize some of these things, we're asking, I think, the IT of some of the stakeholders to do things that they don't normally do or haven't historically done. To, maybe they're opening up a lot of ports that they're not comfortable opening up, or how they're processing the data or pulling the data, managing the data. And I'm just curious, do we see, are there issues here or challenges, or how do we, our stakeholder group in some ways has gotten bigger because, it's this, you're not just giving a manual to the person in operations, you're giving, this is tasks to people in their IT. And if those folks don't open up what you need opened up, it can't be done. So I'm just sort of curious what your experiences are there, what your thoughts are there. And that's also to the panel too.
Yeah, Mike, I'll jump in and say IT is generally regarded as a third rail at my agency. Let's not touch it. Let's not go there. Let's do anything we can to not have to go there. Maybe in the future, we're going to have to overcome that barrier. But for now, it's somewhere we don't want to go in general.
Yeah, I think the IT link is true across operations at this point. We really need to have better integration. I know I went through the planning engineering track at Georgia Tech, but now we really need a planning engineering IT track at universities so people can understand the issues from all of these different sources, because it is extremely siloed. And that is definitely a concern moving forward in the industry at all. But our IT at an MPO level is not even really doing any kind of transportation. They're doing office management. I know at a DOT level, it's very different, but it definitely stands to be a problem for a lot of people across all different topics.
What I found, thank you, Joe and Maria, for this. What I found recently in the last couple of years, with the data becoming available and the challenges with the data, that motivate several states to actually start a bigger effort that is an integrated effort for data, and that brought the IT in a big way. So the answer will be possibly in the future, and some states that started that, is to have a big effort that integrates all the stakeholders and all their data in one location and solve these challenges from a centralized hub of data and data analytics.
Again, I imagine our first instinct would be to outsource that. I can't imagine my agency doing anything like that internally.
Yeah, it will vary by agencies. I know a couple of states already started and they put millions of dollars in that, but it I think it is as you said, Joe, it is possibly the business model will be different, and successful business model will be different for different agencies, I'm assuming.
So So Joe, just for clarity, I apologize, Maria, I just stepped on you, but
No,
I was
you're
looking
fine.
for some clarity. When you say you can't imagine your agency doing that, could you be a little more specific, like just the data management itself, you just think that's something you just have to outsource, or is it, what aspect of it that makes it so uncomfortable for your agency? That
Yeah.
as we as developers need to be thinking about when we're thinking about stakeholders.
What I've experienced now in over 5 years at NCDOT is that IT involvement is pretty much an automatic no. They find reasons to say no, and then if we still want to get something done, we need to work around it, and that's where, you know, the easiest course is to hire a company to get it done and deal with whatever the concerns are. But you know, if we're talking here about bringing in data by the pipeline from all of these devices sitting along the roads, and somehow processing them and getting into somebody who's going to make decisions on their part, that's just not something we're able to say yes to at this point, in my opinion.
And I think that is something I've heard from multiple states, actually. And one of the solutions to me would be for more acceptance of data governance strategies and planning, to have IT involved in that and have their own separate role, so they can't just say no out the gate. So there are like mechanisms for how you get new things inputted and new data streams set up, and having an actual plan and system for all of that is something that I think most states need to start looking into. And opportunities like this, where you could get a lot of value from using more and more connected data that we're getting, is a good push to the industry to start looking more seriously at data governance. So definitely would like to leverage your research to push a different conversation forward. But if you all have any thoughts on how we do that, I would love to hear them.
I mean, Mohammed, this is your presentation, I apologize, but what I'm going to talk about just for a brief second is, I think for me, part of the issue is incentives and performance metrics. In that if you look at an IT group, and I wish maybe there's some IT people here who could put some comments to help out. But if you think about what are their performance metrics, it's often very much, have you been hacked? Have you been, had any of these issues occur? And it's not, did you help Joe be successful in some project that they really don't have a way to track through, right? To show we helped that be successful, because they're not really seen as part of that, even though they are truly one of the implementers. And so they have an incentive system that says we can't have failure. And the easiest way to solve that is to close as many ports as you can. And that's what they do. And I think it makes sense. And until you incentivize in a way that says the success of others is also going to be treated as your success, then they have no reason to do that. All they know is where they're going to get punished. And so they're going to ensure that they don't have those failures occur. So I think that's a real challenge. And I think that's something we as an industry sort of have to face, is to understand it's not just transportation people. It really is critical elements that if they're not getting credit for it, then you can't expect them to be prioritized. But anyway, so do you guys have it? I took over your conversation, Mohammed. I apologize. Joe, Maria, do you have any other, or audience? I apologize, I didn't check. Nagi, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess a more basic question. Who owns the data in a way? If we talk about CAVs and the OEMs generating all these data, I think a prerequisite to that, what kind of private-public partnership needs to be negotiated to even allow those data to be available for performance monitoring and so on. To me, that's also, at least in the near future, it's not likely that those data are going to be available at the level.
Nagi, this is a very good question, and I had the same feeling. But in recent effort that I have been involved in on the state levels, actually the team that won the contract came with some of those OEMs on the team. Like, I'm not going to mention the name of the OEMs, but they came with the OEMs, they came with Google, they came with several of those people. And the agreement was they're going to demonstrate how the data will come from those third-party vendors, or the OEMs, and also the third-party vendors, by the way, and the sensors. And in addition to the things that come from the RSUs, all of them will come to one location and will be demonstrated. So there will be multiple sources, and the OEMs were willing to be part of it and share it on the long term, at least for the project. Now, on the long term, I don't know if they're going to have to go through a contract and charge money for it, but for the project, they were part of the team. So that is one thing that so that tell us that the OEMs are willing to be part of those teams.
Yeah, I think that would be similar to what DOT is doing with vendors, the probe data right now. You get the probe data, you get your link travel times or speed. And I guess that agreement could extend to include this new sources of data as well. So I would tend to agree with Joe that it's got to be done through a third-party vendor, at least in North Carolina.
Okay, so I know we're running a little long of time. Again, I think we could keep going. We'll go to the next presentation. Guidelines for modeling connected and autonomous vehicles. Lily, you're up.
Hello, my name is Lily Eleftheriadou, and I'll present a project that has been developing guidelines that agencies can follow to model autonomous and connected vehicles so they can determine their impact on capacity and other traffic operational measures. This project is led by Dr. Mohammed Hadi of Florida International University with collaborators from Georgia Tech, North Carolina State University, and the University of Florida. Transportation analysts have been using various modeling and simulation tools for planning, design, and operational analysis. These tools help us evaluate the highway system. They help us assess alternative scenarios and the impact of strategies to mitigate congestion. However, what has not been addressed adequately yet is the modeling and simulation of the emerging connected and automated vehicle technologies. For example, what will the capacity of a facility be if there are 20% connected autonomous vehicles on the road? Or should my agency plan to add lanes along this freeway in the next 20 years? Or will having autonomous connected vehicles on the road result in a capacity increase? What percent of connected vehicles should I assume will be on the road in 20 years? Should autonomous connected vehicles operate in exclusive lanes or in mixed traffic? And if they're in their own lane, what's the capacity of such a lane? The challenge is that there is significant uncertainty about these vehicles. We don't know how connected autonomous vehicles will follow one another, how they will change lanes, and how they will accept gaps. We also do not know how human drivers react to the autonomous connected vehicle presence and whether their driving behavior will be different. There's limited information available and just a few data sets. Therefore, it's very difficult for a practitioner to determine what assumptions to use. Without this information, we cannot develop accurate models. And at least for the foreseeable future, we must rely on microsimulation supplemented by limited field data on autonomous connected vehicle operations. So to address this challenge, the research team studied a wealth of resources in the literature and reviewed existing data sets. We examined arterial and freeway applications and focused on mobility and safety impacts. We also met with representatives from state agencies in the Southeast to understand what their main challenges are when attempting to model autonomous connected vehicles. Based on state DOT feedback and a thorough literature review, we developed guidance that practitioners can use to model CEVs. The guidelines discuss pitfalls and challenges and provide recommendations based on the data available to date. We also assembled a few representative case studies to demonstrate various modeling scenarios for CEVs. The research team is now wrapping up the draft final report, and we hope to make this available very soon. We anticipate that agencies can use these guidelines to model CVs and to help them make decisions as they are developing their long-range plans. We're looking forward to working with you and your agencies to help implement these guidelines, and we're very interested in refining them as better information becomes available. So look for our final report sometime in February 2022, and the research team is looking forward to answering your questions.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so let's see, we've got our folks back. And Lily, I don't see you yet, but I'm sure you're there. All right, I gotta be a little more careful here with my questions because Lily controls a lot of my budget, so I gotta be a little kinder here.
Plus, you're on that project, right? You can't criticize too much.
I know. By the way, I do like that your picture of the UFAV has an alligator, a gator that's about to eat the driver. I don't know if that was an intended irony or what, but I sort of like it. So as you know, I always go first. Joe or Maria, you've got something you'd like to jump in on?
And this one I was just really excited about. I think this is definitely something we are looking for. I know that it's difficult to just immediately kind of put some of these modeling processes together in new regions when you've done research in a specific area, but that's definitely something that I think a lot of people at ARC have already been looking into. So I'm gonna have to get you in touch with them.
For my part, I think this is something that could help us overcome the skepticism, because right now we're modeling exactly 0.0 CAVs in the design year 2045, and that's about to go to 2050, and I suspect we're going to still model 0.0. And most of the staff is a firm believer in 0.0. They're skeptical. They don't think they're coming. So guidelines like this on how to do the modeling maybe could help overcome some of that skepticism. Get to Maria, or Maria was saying before, at least to the level of scenario planning and design. So I'm hoping for that.
Yeah, I'll say that, for example, there are so many pilots out there with autonomous shuttles, and these operate in regular streets. And so we're starting to collect some data about how these operate and how vehicles around them operate. And if we're able to model that, at least others who are planning pilots, they can say, all right, I have at least some notion of what the car following, the lane changing and all that is going to be. So I can evaluate how my autonomous shuttle is going to be integrated into that. And, you know, going back to Joe's question about the demand side, you know what, a possibility might be that we could do ranges, you know, and say, all right, most likely it's going to be somewhere between this and this. And so based on that, you can make at least some preliminary decisions and say, okay, I can be conservative, I can be aggressive relative to what the market penetration will be. So at least it's getting us somewhere. And I will also say that we're planning a follow-on to this project with our last year of STRIDE funding. And so we'll be looking for case studies. So if you have a place where you're thinking there might be some autonomous connected vehicles, we'd love to have a specific location where we can work with you and kind of evaluate everything from demand all the way to different options and see what the best way forward might be.
Joe?
Yeah, one other aspect that's, I think, really important with guidelines from a reputable source would be to help eliminate any bias that creeps into our process, because there's certain communities across North Carolina right now that want us to believe they're going to have 100% CAVs because they never want to lay another square inch of asphalt within their community. And then there's other places that think they're going to have 0% forever because they want all the roads widened to 10 lanes in each direction. So we need good guidance to avoid those kind of biases creeping into our process.
So let me ask, I'd like to ask a question of Joe and Maria and maybe some of the participants about, as we develop these guidelines, I'm somewhat curious if I say a stakeholder, I target my stakeholder as public agency in general. Is the thought of guidance, would you rather see guidance that says, you know, as Lily mentioned, you know, the shuttle or maybe individual AV, here's how you model an AV, right? Here's the algorithms somebody might use or that kind of thing. Or would you be more looking at guidance that says, that's making what Joe, you talked about, sort of an assumption of a third party. You're going to hire somebody to actually do the modeling. And you need guidance on, how do I review what they're doing? How do I look for red flags or understand what's going on without necessarily knowing how to do the specific modeling itself? What's a more useful product for a DOT or an ARC, an MPO as a stakeholder? The here's how I review something, or here's how I actually do it?
I mean, that's basically, a lot of MPOs don't even do any in-house modeling. They just contract all of it out. So for them, obviously, it makes a lot more sense to figure out what's going into it and how to review it. For us, we do a lot of our modeling in-house. So we would want to know how to do it. Even if we were going to contract it out, we would want to know how they're doing it and test it out ourselves. So that's a big difference. For a lot of the kind of project specific modeling, like one autonomous shuttle, you might end up working with more local governments than even a state or regional government to try for them to understand if this is a project they want to invest in. And in that case, it's almost definitely going to be contracted out. So definitely good to have reviews for that one.
Yeah,
Maria, you were well informed at Georgia Tech. I gave you a question with two possible outcomes, and you said, give me both.
yeah.
There you go. I learned from the best.
I want both as well. But if you're making me choose, I think the first one is more important because sometimes we do things in-house and we need that first one to be right, whether it's in-house or consultant.
Okay. Nagi, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, again, it's kind of a follow-up on that same question. My sense here is that what you may relate to what Lily also said, what we may end up with this project is just give you a sensible range of things. For example, if somebody, or if you do capacity of AVs or capacities of CAVs, you cannot go to 10,000 vehicles per hour. For example, I'm just exaggerating. And I think, and I kind of try to make that point clear within the group, big difference between AVs and CAVs. And we need to make sure that AVs are probably going to reduce your capacity. It's not something people want to know. CAVs are likely to improve it just because you have that ability. And so I think the important thing is to also being able to distinguish between the various technologies as we model them or even as we deploy them.
So we have a couple participant questions. First one, Lily, in the effort, you're also considering, does the current guidance consider human interaction, pedestrian and other road user components?
We haven't really specified the human interaction yet. We do have some case studies, and I think maybe a couple of them are looking into that, but that would be an interesting follow-up for our phase 2, where we're looking specifically at that. And let me see if Mohammed has anything to say, since he is the PI on this project.
Lily, the question is about human interaction with the
pedestrians and other road users.
or with pedestrian and other road users. I think this is a very nice application. In fact, what we have done in the phase that is ongoing, that is almost done, that one we did testing of gap acceptance for the left turn and red light violation warning and gap acceptance for unsignalized intersection. And we were thinking at that point in time to do the pedestrian. Obviously, it is kind of similar application where we are looking at both the mobility and safety impacts. And I think I always like to do that. So depending on the group, when we will discuss it, we may actually include that in phase 2.
And second question, when we think about changing travel behavior as well as enhancing traffic safety conditions, we were at, one of the participants was asking, for connected autonomous vehicles will likely have an important role in the relationship between those two things, the travel behavior and the safety. And they're wondering, do you see any space for developing models that really address both of these issues?
Can you repeat the question, Mike, again?
Do you see the development of connected and autonomous vehicle models that are looking at really how travel behavior and safety interact? Sort of a model that's addressing both at the same time. So now we often treat them as separate things. So, some people doing safety, and we get other people doing travel behavior.
Sure.
Really, there's quite a bit of interaction. And
how
do you see that playing out?
Yeah, that's for sure, and it is an interesting area of research too, because if you want your automated vehicle to, one of the things that they say, if you want your automated vehicle to act safely, you need it to work at least when it is mixed with the human, it will act in the same way, and merge in the same way in the safe manner and things like that. So, looking at it from safety point of view, to look at how the cars are behaving, and that could be done using different ways in simulation. But looking at it from safety point of view, then a number of interaction and near miss and things like that. That I think is very interesting. And you look at the trajectory of those vehicles and see how safe those trajectories are.
So, Nagi, I see you got your hand up. If you're specific to that last question,
Yes.
I actually got to jump forward if that's all right. So we have 15 minutes left.
Yeah,
Okay?
it is specific to that question.
All right. Could you be real quick?
Yes, it's basically, just to let you know, we have done some work to model the impact of autonomous vehicle, connected vehicle into the travel demand model. And that gives us some insight into behavior, into route choice, into other things. So that work is underway, but obviously with a lot of assumptions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so for the last 15 minutes, if we don't need them all, that's fine, but I absolutely could use more. I'd really like to hear, from our panelists and from the audience, Joe, Maria, having, now we've gone through these 6 presentations and without thinking about a specific one, what I've really noticed is 2 very big themes. And these themes that I've seen, one is the importance of data and data as a product in and of itself, and how one manages data, how one maintains the data, how others might use it. So I think that's a big theme that I think from the point of view, maybe from stakeholders. But the other one that also I'd really love to hear from you guys, and it would be great as the researchers thinking about how do we get this out, are some of these concepts of paths to implementation and maybe obstacles to implementation and guidance on, maybe things we need to do better up front or talking to, we saw it with the HCM one, we talked about, Nagi's work is, are we going through, do we have to go through the HCM or is there another way for somebody maybe to get implemented? We've seen in, Dr. Gwynn's data piece, boy, do you really the way to get to if your stakeholders to DOT, really the way you've got to do that is through a third party. So just some thoughts on how we should be thinking about this paths or obstacles to implementation so we can get our work, out of the report and into the agencies, into the users.
I'll go first there. I think Joe said it really well earlier when he said, was talking about the weaving and you found your niche there's a small community around it. So it's easier to get the yeses you need. And getting something that people are currently working on is huge. I think another theme we've seen here is a lot of research is of course done on like cutting edge technologies, like autonomous vehicles, that at an agency level, we're just not seeing yet. So part of it is thinking about things from the perspective of what we are actually doing day to day and working within that. Not to say that you shouldn't do research on the cutting edge. We want to see that as well, but it's going to be harder to implement tools, especially at a regional or a statewide level.
Yeah, agree and agree. Basic research, cutting edge research, fantastic. Go for it, find what you can, and don't worry about implementation. It'll happen 10 or 20 or 50 years from now. But yeah, if you really, really want something to be implemented quickly, right at the end of the project, you kind of got to get with the agency people all the way through, way before the proposal stage. You got to start having those conversations. What's the problem the agency is facing, and what's your way that you can help us get around it, solve that problem. So yeah, those conversations have to happen early and throughout. And you probably not going to get much implemented in a reactive way where the agency people have not been involved in the development of the project. That's yeah, we got our own priorities and our own fires to put out. So the emphasis is going to go there.
Do you have any recommendations on how the research side we can have that engagement? Any thoughts on how one creates that engagement? I'm the director of the Georgia Transportation Institute in Georgia. And that's one of the questions I often get, and particularly from new researchers, is how do we engage? How do I successfully engage with the DOT or the MPO or my local government? Do you have any thoughts on, so how do I do that? How do I get this conversation so I know I'm doing research that's going to have the meaningful impact that maybe we want to look for and maintain that engagement?
I know from my side, I just started a TISMA subcommittee this year. So definitely invited a lot of the researchers around the region to that, to keep them in the loop on what everyone's worried about, what we're talking about. B, I'd like to get a better engagement just to hear what research is going on in the areas that we are working on, to stay a little bit updated ourselves, because we certainly don't do a great job of that all the time. And that just started, but I think there's probably lots of groups around, different regional groups or statewide groups to have that conversation in that already exists.
And I would add to that, you have to know the org chart of the agency. And, there's no secrets that ours is online anyway, but find somebody in the org chart and call or send an email and ask a question, and hey, who's the expert in your agency on topic XYZ, and a name will come out pretty soon. I mean, at the staff level, we all know who the experts are sitting around the building here, and so if you ask, we'll tell you. We'll put you on the trail anyway. I'm surprised. Again, five years at DOT, I'm surprised at how few of those calls I get. And I'm an ex-researcher. I thought I'd be a pretty good resource for people, and they're not calling me. I don't know, So got to make the effort. Got to reach out, and most of the staff I know are happy to accommodate to tell you what we know, and more importantly, who we know. But got to reach out and make the effort to ask.
Joe, however, one thing I do like about your research program is the need to identify a champion. So if you have a good idea, don't keep it to yourself. Essentially identify a champion, talk to the champion, and if the champion is on board, the likelihood of your idea getting funded improves significantly.
And the reverse of that is true too, Nagy. If you're a researcher out there with a research idea and you write up a proposal and toss it into the mill, and I'm the house expert in that subject, and I've never seen this proposal before, it's not going to get funded. So you need to reach out, find that champion, and have that conversation to even have a chance, at least within our system.
Correct.
Maria?
I think one other issue that it's very different based off of agency, university, individual, but I know several people in general in the region who have felt burned by working with universities before, just because the alignment is not always there in terms of what they're looking for versus what we're looking for, because we usually want something super sustainable, something easy to use, and sometimes they're looking for ways to fund the next project that they're working on, or a side project that is related but isn't always exactly what we're looking for. And I think that coming to the table upfront with, okay, this is what our goals are, and they might not align with your goals, but let's find where our goals are the same and let's kind of go down that path, is something that is better to have that conversation up front than have people feel like they didn't get what they were promised from the get-go.
You know, Lily, I wonder, listening to this, and I'm pulling you in as the director of Stride, if there might be value in maybe Stride heading up an engagement group where we reach out to maybe the Joes and the Marias and the others of the world and sort of circle them back with some fact and see, how do we do this, and actually create some, what are the mechanisms? What are ways to maybe do some of this outreach and just sort of help people do that? I think that could have some use. So, I mean, I know some of the folks I talk to here, they get a little nervous about calling people at the DOT because they don't want to be seen as a bother. They don't want to seem like they're lobbying when they're not supposed to. So there's sort of a weird dichotomy there. I don't know if that's the right word for that, but on how one makes some of those things happen. And that might be actually a really good role for somebody like Stride to sort of help out. And Maria, I'm part of your TISMO group, and that's been fantastic. You know, I've sat in on some of those meetings, and I really appreciate that. And you've got the university folks there, you've got the DOT there. You know, I think things like that, maybe creating a group, I don't know, or if I'm just creating another group, I don't want to do that if it serves no purpose. But if Joe and Maria, if you think those conversations, how to roll people in, how to teach engagement, and maybe we need to teach engagement. I never got engagement taught as a PhD student, right? I was in a lab somewhere. I wasn't learning engagement. Now I'm a fairly sarcastic fellow, so I figured it out. But how to do that might have some value.
That's a great idea. I would love to brainstorm about what's the most effective way for us to do this. Absolutely.
Well, I think we got two stakeholders right here who I think will be glad to jump in.
You volunteering me, Michael?
We very much appreciate it.
So I know we are up against the clock. So let me just take a moment to really thank all of the presenters. It's been fantastic. I know I've learned a lot. I've been very engaged throughout it. I thought this was great presentations. Thank you so much to Joe and Maria. Your input and insights have been just fantastic. Again, thanks to Ondine and Inez. You guys probably gave me a script for what I'm supposed to be saying right now, and I'm making it up. I apologize for that. But again, this has been great. Lily, I'm assuming as a leader, you're supposed to close this out. So all you.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everybody, for attending. And there's the third day of presentations tomorrow. And Ondine has posted here the agenda for tomorrow as well. And We're going to focus on equity tomorrow, and I'll be the moderator for the day. So I hope you will be able to join us tomorrow.